Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, the man in black himself, Mr. Grant Ramey of Volquest.com. Grant, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. I think this microphone is hiding my gray hairs on my chin, so maybe I think that makes the black makes it stand out a little bit more, so maybe I should rethink that whole thing.
There you go. Are you growing out a beard? Are we doing a winter beard?
I cannot grow out a beard. I've tried. It looks like a middle schooler trying too hard to grow out a beard, so I'll leave it as I'm lazy with it until it starts itching me, and then I got to fix it. So it's about to that stage.
There you go. I was thinking about it. I don't think Rick Barnes had never had any facial hair, right? Like, he's clean shaven always.
Same haircut, clean shaven. Rick is. You talk about another guy, man in black. He wears black at practice. If he wears a black vest and a black long sleeve at practice, you know it's going to be a long day for the players. If he wears a white shirt under the black vest, it's not going to be a tough day. We've learned to decipher the wardrobe of Rick Barnes.
Do you think he does that intentionally?
I have no idea, but it's a very big coincidence if not. Because we've tracked it for a while. We've tracked it.
Do you know what does he do for the barber? Like, what, he has to be super careful. Like, Hype's wearing a hat all the time. Hype can hide. Vitello, I imagine it'd be a lot of pressure to be Tony Vitello's barber locally in Knoxville. That's a story for somebody to be involved with the Rick Barnes, Tony Vitello barber situation, because that's a lot of pressure.
And the stories that Rick tells, I'm sure his barber has a lot of great stories from those sit-downs. The thing I respect about Hype, the backwards hat. Love the backwards hat. As an old guy trying to look like a young guy, respect that so much.
He's a big. Do you wear your hat backwards more often than not?
Probably because I wear sunglasses a lot, and I hate the bill of the hat unless I'm wearing a flat bill with the sunglasses. So that's the problem. But I also put my hood up a lot because I don't know, a loner or whatever, a introvert, I guess maybe. So introvert put the hood up. I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Hood up? Like, where are we going? Like, Grant he's at the Blunt Public Library, and he's just got the hood up. Just suspicious Ramey, always around.
The COVID era was a weird era, but you could go to the grocery store with AirPods in, your hood up, a hat on, and
hood up in the grocery store,
and a mask on your face. It looks like you're robbing the place. You're just shopping for eggs and fabric softener.
What in the world, Grant? You can't be doing this.
It was a wild time. Time.
I mean, I'm a team never get involved person. Like, my wife and I are very, very different in this regard. Like, my wife has, I'm not kidding. My wife picked up a turtle on the side of the road and took him to the Tennessee emergency vet or something, and to see if they could do something for him. That was just part of her day. And it was just that's my wife. I'm on the other hand, where it's like, don't get involved. Like, the best case scenario is it's neutral from me getting involved, or it gets worse. There's no positive spin of me getting involved. So I'm a team never get involved. However, if I see Grant Ramey with a mask and the hood up in Food City, I might get involved, where I'm like, hey, I understand he might be a Tennessee Volunteers journalist, but in the circumstance that he's not, can we go ahead and check in there?
Here's my level of introvert. Monday morning, flying to New York for Jimmy V Classic, Miami-Tennessee basketball game. Delta, I picked the seat, the very back row, because nobody's back there. It wasn't a full flight. Delta tried to move me up to row 9 with the main comfort, extra leg room, whatever. There's not more leg room. It's just it's your imagination playing tricks on you if you think you got more leg room there. So I changed my seat back to 23D or whatever, because there was nobody within 3 rows of me. That's my paradise right there.
There you go. Yeah, the airplane, if you can do that by yourself, that's the way to go. Because
poor man's first class. Nobody on your row.
When we were on our way to Maui this summer, I was having an inner monologue breakdown, because I was in the middle and my wife was to my left, but we got someone to my right at the window, and she was coughing. No mask, just coughing, sneezing, and I'm like, we this is a once in a lifetime trip,
right?
And we're going to Maui. This is a long trip. This is a haul, and you're out here coughing, sneezing. I was beside myself, Grant. It was almost I was going to go into a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where I was like, we got to get her off the flight. We got to get her out of here.
You're not ruining this trip for me, lady.
If I sneeze in Maui, I'm going to find you. It's a full Taken situation.
Tennessee basketball flew commercial to Maui in 20 whatever, Rick's second year, I think, 2015, 2016, whatever year that was. And Kyle Alexander, you remember him, 6'11", whatever. He flew coach. He had to. You imagine that flight from Atlanta to Maui or Honolulu or whatever it was. Fold himself up and put himself in coach. It was a wild scene for sure.
Goodness gracious. When is Tennessee going back to Maui? Do we know?
Actually, I don't think Rick Barnes is going to go back out to Maui because of how long the flight is. I think he's not full Dan Hurley in terms of I'm never going back, but I think he likes the 4-team 2-game tournaments in November more so than the 3 games in 3 days tournaments. I think he likes and prefers those, and I think he likes the shorter trips, like the Bahamas flight compared to the Maui flight is no comparison. So much easier.
That's true. Well, we could talk all things pilots, but people tuning in here, they're like, I thought Grant and Chase talked and wrote about Tennessee. I don't. We're getting a lot of inside baseball here on the flying patterns of the Tennessee basketball team. But hey, that is part of what you're going to get here, and that's a good thing. So Grant, Tennessee 9-0, they beat Miami this week. But to me, what I think when you're diving through the numbers and looking at what's different about this Tennessee team this year versus last year, and one of the things that I wanted to get your perspective on is, look, they're top 10 in offense and defense in KenPom right now. But I think all offseason, and, there were a lot of Tennessee fans, in the general quarters asking about this of, well, could this be, what's the drop-off post Dalton Knecht and what's the most realistic outlook? And I don't know where you stood on this, but me, Shump, and everybody were kind of I think this offense is going to be better. And I know that's weird for fans to hear that, oh, you're losing maybe the rookie of the year in Dalton Knecht. How could the offense get better? But I just thought the ceiling with this collection of guys was higher. And part of it was you get Zakai back, and this roster just feels more conducive to maximizing what Zakai does offensively. He leads the SEC in assists right now. And then you just surround him with shooters, and then a rim-running 5 in Okpara, who just feels more like a Barnes 5 than – it doesn't mean Adu and Awaka were not good players. I don't think it was as natural a fit as Okpara has really been. And then the shooting is you go 2 for 1 at the transfer portal. Igor and Chaz have both been huge hits, especially Igor of late, that if you hit on those, the ceiling I just think collectively was higher. But it was one of those, I need to see it to believe it. I need to see a Rick Barnes top 10 efficiency offense to get there. And it seems to me, it's pretty sustainable. What do you think about that?
They have impressed me a ton the last, how many weeks it's been, 5-6 weeks. Honestly, going into the preseason, I was kind of low on this team. I didn't know exactly what to make of them. I just didn't obviously you're like you said, losing Dalton, generational talent, that kind of guy comes around once in a lot, not very often, very, very rare. I mean, and to try to replace him, and it just felt like I thought this offense was going to kind of go back to what we've saw from Rick Barnes before Dalton Knecht, where it was more of a struggle and you're relying on that top 5 defense and all that stuff. And even the Indiana exhibition, Gardner-Webb season opening game, I really wasn't that impressed with this team because I just didn't know what to expect of them. Since then, I mean, Chaz, I didn't expect Chaz to put up the numbers he put up at North Florida, but just to watch him shoot the ball, the way he scores it, it just looks easy, kind of effortless for him. I mean, the way he played at Louisville, I think that was maybe one of the first big performances where he just came out and did it. Igor was a little bit slow out of the gate, so I didn't really know what to think, but I knew the coaching staff was really high on him. Thought he's going to be a really good rebounder, really good scorer, step out and shoot it. Rick's never really had that 6'10" stretch 4 that's going to step out and shoot it a ton. So once he started going, I didn't think Cade Phillips would be this year-over-year progression where he's been extremely impressive. Jordan Gainey has been extremely impressive to me. The way he's changed his game looks like he's much more in control, comfortable, all that stuff. He's been huge. And honestly, this team's not deep, obviously. You need to get Cam Carr back in January. You need to rush him back as quickly as you can get him there. And you're out. JP Estrella's out for the year. But at the same time, it kind of feels like, and I've made this point before, the 18-19 team didn't have the best talent in the country, but they had a rotation of 7-8 dudes who knew exactly what their roles were, and they went out and executed those roles, and all the pieces to the puzzle fit together. I think this team is kind of thin, and you'd like to have more bodies on the bench, but that 18-19 team, 17-18 even, they had 7-8 guys that they rolled with, and that was it. They had some freshmen on the end of the bench, but they weren't competitive depth. They weren't going to help you there. So I think this is a Rick Barnes team that kind of feels like some past really good teams he's had. It's just a better scoring team. That 18-19 team didn't play defense like this one does. I think they were maybe 40th in KenPom. This team's top 5, number 2, I think. And the offense was obviously elite then, and this offense right now has been elite. So they've impressed me a ton over the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and I wonder too, because this was always the thing in the NBA with Harden, is so many people criticize Harden's defense, right? Like part of like prime Harden was like, oh yeah, it's great that he has this high usage and he's super efficient from three and getting to the line. Like he's clearly a brilliant offensive player, but the defense has to matter. There's two sides to the floor. The problem with that is like if you talk to any NBA player, any coach, like when you have that kind of usage, it's just hard. Luka's going through that right now. When you're putting that much on a player offensively, that like it's going to be hard for them to also be an above average defender. Like that's just asking too much. I think on the flip side though, with Tennessee, the depth thing to me comes into question is, look, they're obviously defending, Rick Barnes is always going to defend at a high level, but it asks a lot of these guys to defend at a top 10 level the way Rick Barnes wants, and also play offense at a top 10 level. And I wonder what that looks like once we get into SEC play. Like, how gassed are these guys? Because I think they were getting a little gassed against Miami. They were obviously super shorthanded. They only play 7 guys. We'll see how it looks in Champaign on Saturday. But that, to me, is my thing. Is like, I think they, at their peak, when they're fresh, they can play at a top 10 level on both sides. But I do kind of wonder what the toll of the ask from Rick Barnes and the staff to for Tennessee to be defensively, and if that starts to catch up to the team offensively with their legs. Because this is a 3-point heavy shooting team, and if they start losing their legs a little bit because they are having to defend so much, and because the SEC is just so deep that might have 12 tournament teams this year, I wonder what the shooting total start to look like when we're in February.
For sure, and I do think you saw some tiredness in that lull in the second half against Miami, and you look down and it's December 10th, and they've got 4 more months of this or whatever. And it's not only that, it's the SEC where it's an insane SEC field this year, where it feels like everybody's talked about it. Like just about every road game could be a quad 1 game, because that's how elite the competition is. So. Like, and this is not to knock them down or anything. I don't think they're the number 1 team in the country. They are right now because they were number 3 and everybody lost around them last week. And they handled their business as the number 1 team the other night against Miami. Going to Illinois is going to be a completely different animal, and we'll kind of get a better gauge of what this team's like with that huge target on your back. But they've just handled their business so far. They haven't played an elite schedule so far. That obviously a little bit of a different story when you go to Illinois and what I assume is going to be a capacity crowd and a tough place to play. But they've taken care of business against the schedule that's been in front of them, and they've won every game by at least 13 points. So I need to see them kind of falter and struggle before I kind of know where they are in terms of what they might look like when they start to struggle in the SEC, because it's going to be such a tough test, just kind of night in and night out, because this is what the league is. It's going to cannibalize itself a little bit. But yeah, it's a little bit thin, and you wonder about what's it going to look like. In January is a really tough month. January is just like the grind. February, you can kind of start looking forward to Selection Sunday and Championship Week and all that stuff. And you play, bigger games. January, the grind is going to be very, very interesting to me, because, I mean, we got done the other night at the Garden, and here comes Arkansas and Michigan, and they go back and forth and back and forth. And Arkansas is coming to Tennessee January 4th, and, all that's going to go into that SEC opener. So it's going to be a tough grind, and I'm interested to see how they handle it. That's why Cam Carr, I think, is going to be really important to get him back. Not that you're going to lean on him huge to do things offensively, but he's got a cast on his hand, and he's working on defense on practice, because in practice, because they need him. They need that body when he gets back. They need him to be ready to go as soon as he can get that cast off and get back on the floor.
Who do you think's been the best player through 9 games? If you had to say who's been the MVP for Tennessee through 9, because I was thinking about this earlier, and I don't know. I don't think I don't have an answer.
Well, I mean, Chaz is the obvious, just because Chaz has been different. Like, I mean, Chaz comes down 14 seconds into that game the other night and makes a 3. And you got to think about the Garden. Tennessee was 6 for 23 from the 3-point line against Florida Atlantic in 2023 Sweet 16 game. 2021, the Jimmy V Classic, 45 minutes of the worst basketball you've ever seen against Texas Tech, 57-52. They went 6 for 39 from the 3-point line. And they use that Spalding T1000 basketball that everybody hates, and everybody always talks about it, and why that event uses it. Who knows? They sponsor it, whatever. But he just comes down and makes that shot. And Tennessee went 6 for 11 from the 3-point line over the first 9 minutes of that game. And I think it's because the guys like Chaz kind of set the tone. Like, we're going to come out, we're going to make shots, and it's going to happen. Whereas the past, it's been a bit of a struggle. So I think Chaz could just show up anywhere on any rim with any collection of talent. He's like that lethal shooter dude on Instagram sometimes, where it's just like, how does this guy just make these shots? And he just shows up and makes them. So I mean, I would go with Chaz, but there's a lot of options despite this being a 7-8 man rotation. I mean, Gainey, we talked about, he's been huge. Cade's been huge off the bench. Felix Okpara has given them good stuff. I think what they expected from him. And Igor has been a guy who they were really high on him, and we've seen why, because he's so versatile.
I wonder too, because you kind of take him for granted. I've been,
and I should say, I didn't even mention Zakai or Jahmai Mashack. I mean,
that's who I was bringing up here. Jahmai
continue.
He's just someone I can understand it, and I think part of what is it. There's a lot of appealing things about Jahmai as a player, but one of them is just that his personality lends itself to his style, where to do what he does and to do what Rick Barnes and the staff asked him to be, you have to have the personality that Jahmai has, because it's not fun. It's hard. It's going to wear you out. It's not, you might get a couple shots a game. We'll see how teams defend you, and you might get some open corner threes. You might get some just fast break points, but outside of that, there's not going to be a high usage opportunity for you. But you can play a lot, and we do need you, but it's just not going to be something where you stuff the box score, that kind of thing. And I'm just curious because his role has advanced this year. Obviously, he's a big returnee with Sakai. And I mean, I think he's just someone you take for granted on this Tennessee team. But what have you seen from Jahmai here through 9 games? What looks different about him this year than even last year?
I think the offense has improved. I think the jump shot stuff over the summer has been pretty well publicized on some of these ESPN broadcasts, how much he shot it over the summer and how much he tried to improve that jump shot. Still, I think his defense has gone still to another level, which is hard to believe because he's been so elite defensively all 3 years, really, that he's been here. But, I mean, he started guarding the 5 some against Miami the other night. That was huge. Tennessee needed that because Lynn Kidd was wearing them out there in the first part of the second half when Miami was making that run. I mean, he's just a guy who literally loves, the defense. He loves the defensive. It's just hard to find those guys. And he's the perfect fit for this Tennessee basketball program, all this stuff. Like, speaking of COVID, he was recruited during the COVID process, never visited Tennessee. Obviously, he's from California, and he signs with Tennessee. Like, he took that leap of faith to come play defense for Rick Barnes. Like, he's been that kind of guy from day one, and he just loves it. I mean, Rod Clark, Tennessee's assistant coach, was talking on, what day was that, Thursday, about being in the Bahamas, and he came out of his hotel room. They were going to the gym, a few hours before tip-off, and he's walking down the hallway, and Jahmai's laying on a bench in the hallway watching YouTube clips of Jeremy Roach because they're going to play Baylor that night, and Jeremy Roach is going to be his assignment. Like, he wants to defend the best player on the floor. Like Illinois last year, he wanted Terrence Shannon. He wants that assignment every single – he loves it that much. And whatever he can give you on the offensive end is a benefit. I think he's hit some big shots. He hit one in the big in the second half against Miami that was big. So he's improved offensively, and the defense has somehow gone to another level.
Absolutely. How do you think Okpara will handle the Croatian big against Illinois on Saturday? Because I think that's an interesting, huge matchup for Okpara.
It is, and he didn't have his best night Tuesday night against Miami. He needs to have a little bit of a bounce back, and they're never going to expect him to do a ton offensively, but Rick Barnes always. They
did that opener though. They were feeding him those first 5 minutes of who was that? I don't even remember now, but I remember
Gardner Webb.
Yes, or I just texted right in the group chat. I was like, what's happening here? What are we doing?
I mean, that's kind of Rick. He wants to play inside out. Even when it was Kyle Alexander, and Kyle Alexander had been playing basketball for 15 minutes, they wanted to get the ball in there. I guess Grant Williams as well back in that day, and get it back outside and play inside out. So that's always going to be a thing, but. I mean, what you've seen from Felix, I feel like, is what the coaches talked about all offseason. Like, he's going to be one of the best defensive bigs Rick's ever had, and he can give you offensively kind of similar to what Jonas Adu gave you numbers-wise, just in a completely different way that he's going to go about it. He's not stepping out and shooting jump shots. He's going to be physical, play above the rim, finish lobs, stuff like that. So defensively, I think and offensively too, I think he needs to have a little bit of a bounce back. Because if Illinois can just dump it down and get buckets in the paint, life on the road is going to get a lot tougher.
Do you think they win ultimately on Saturday?
I don't know, to be honest. It's going to be such a tough environment, I think, because of that number one target and because so much has gone right to this point. But also at the same time, I just laid out for 5 minutes why I didn't think this team was going to be that great. And here we are 6 weeks later, and they're off to the best start in 20-something years for this program. and they're ranked number 1. So, and also, honestly, I thought they would go to Louisville and have that same capacity crowd, even though it wasn't capacity crowd, it's close to it. But that first big game for Louisville, Pat Kelsey, all that stuff, and they just went out there and started whatever it was, 12-0, and went crazy in that game and completely kind of blew me away in that game as well. So maybe it's just my glass half empty approach or mindset or view or whatever, but I just think it's going to be a tough place to play. And you got that number 1 ranking next to your name. That's a big deal. I mean, Alabama came here 2 years ago, and Tennessee was a really good team then, and they didn't have to make a statement in that game, but it was a statement because Alabama's number 1, and you want to beat a number 1 ranked team on your home floor. So it's going to be a really, really tough challenge.
I think it can do it because then we're at uncharted waters here with the men's and women's programs where if Tennessee can win on Saturday, the men's and Lady Vols, I think, will both be undefeated going into January, which
For sure.
I don't know if that's ever happened. My gut is no, but that's crazy town for these two.
I mean, Tennessee's got, after Illinois, they got, I don't know what order these games are in, but it's Norfolk State, it's MTSU, and it's Western Carolina. So those are 3 bye games that you're going to treat like bye games at home. And then you have Arkansas and Jonas Adu coming back to Knoxville January 4th, and John Calipari too, not to mention, for the SEC opener. So I don't know the Lady Vol schedule, but I know Tennessee could handle its part of that if it came to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Igor, though, I was going through the Sports Reference stats, and I was looking at Igor, and he's number 1 in offensive rating of any of the key contributors for Tennessee. It's like 141, something like that, when he's on the floor for Tennessee. And it kind of stands out. And I love JP Estrella. I think he's also just like a great culture fit. Like JP Estrella is just, I think, a great long-term guy for Tennessee, and I think he can be a really good player here. But there is part of me that now that we've watched a couple games post Estrella, that Igor at the 5, those minutes, it's just a different look that we've seen from Tennessee where you don't want to be in that situation a lot and wearing Igor down like that. But I think it's forced Rick Barnes to play Igor at the 5 in spots. And Cade Phillips, as we'll talk about here in a second, has held his own there too. But Igor at the 5 and the way that looks offensively, it's just really hard to defend Tennessee if they have Igor. Like even if you put in Dubar, Chaz, Jahmai, Zakai, and insert Gainey in one of those lineups, and it's just a whole heck of a lot of shooting. It's a lot of guys you have to account for on the perimeter, and then you have maybe the best passer in the SEC who is going to find those guys and is going to live off driving kicks to that degree that I just think Igor may be the key that just kind of unlocks all of this. Like Chaz is obviously the highest upside. Like Chaz is shooting preposterous right now. He's shooting over 8 threes a game. He's hitting 50% of them. Like it's just Chaz is like out of this world right now. But Igor is just a totally, you hit on this, and I think it's 100% accurate, is Tennessee has not had a guy like Igor. And a lot, I mean, guess Grant Williams is kind of like a Igor type where it's just he plays inside, he can shoot threes. Like he's just a different kind of player. But Igor, I just feel like, is just such a big, huge home run that I understand Chaz as a guard and his shooting is going to get that. But Igor, man, like it matches the eye test that the numbers like him and what he does for this Tennessee offense, right?
I mean, Igor is kind of a little bit of a representation of what this Tennessee team is like. They don't have a ton of depth like we've talked about, but it feels like a lot of these guys are Swiss Army knives and they can do a lot of different things. And that's huge because you can play a lot of different lineups. You can play a lot of different ways, a lot of different combinations with the guys you do have. Igor, basically since Louisville on, it felt like it started to slow down for him, click for him. I mean, they were super high on him as a rebounder alone going into the season because he averaged 8.5 at Charlotte, and Charlotte played one of the slowest paces in college basketball. Obviously, you play at a higher pace, you're going to get more opportunities to rebound. He's done that. He's shot it well. He scored different ways. And yeah, you're right. If you can go to the 5, if you can mix up those looks, I mean, with limited numbers, if you got that kind of versatility, it changes things. And we've seen that so far. I mean, I'm not stunned to hear that he's got the highest offensive rating just because of the way he's played and the way we've seen it. The Chaz, the shooting stuff just kind of blinds you a little bit towards what everybody else is doing because you're so focused on him. But man, Igor, the minutes he's given them, what he does, rebounding, scoring, assists, block shots, all that kind of stuff, steals, just the total. I mean, he can bring the ball up as a kind of point forward a little bit, and he can play the 5. I mean, that's what that guy can do for you. And you got to give credit to Barnes and his staff and what they've pulled out of the portal. Like these are 3 starters, huge contributors. Darlin Stone Dubar off to a bit of a slow start, but he can help them too down the road.
He's gonna have to help.
Yeah, and the culture of this thing and how all the pieces fit together. Somebody said the other night at the Garden. Like Jonas is there with Arkansas, but what you have to look at with Tennessee is this thing keeps going regardless of who's been here. Like the staff has changed, the roster has changed. That's the era we live in. But they've found guys that they needed. They've got them. They've plugged them in, and this thing has kept rolling along. And Igor is a really good kind of picture of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's kind of like one of those things where the best testament to Barnes and his staff is that Tennessee has 3 transfers, first-year transfers in the starting lineup, and it looks like this 5-man unit have been playing together for years. Like, there's not a better testament. Yeah.
It's
right?
Just,
like, that's what I see.
It's crazy because that's what I thought. I thought going into the season, all these new pieces, like I liked a lot of the pieces. I just didn't know kind of how they were going to fit together and how long it was going to take them to find that fit and all that stuff. And ever since that first couple of weeks, man, they've hit the ground running, and all these pieces have fit together like you said. Like they've been playing together 4 years, and they've been playing together since whatever it was, April, when everybody got here, May, June, whatever the month was in the off season, and they've made it work. I mean, they have found the guys, they've plugged them in, and this thing has been rolling since early on.
Yeah. And look, I love Santi, love Triple J, but the difference with the role players this year, especially, I mean, Gainey, he's up to 37% from 3 versus 29 last year. The game slowed down significantly for him. He's a key contributor. I just feel like when you watch him, Jahmai has a lot more confidence in his shot.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan has a lot more confidence in his shot. Zakai's always going to take tough threes. Like, I don't think his percentages are going to be good because that man loves contested threes. And that's just you live with it because he's just so good in so many other ways. But Zakai is like one of those where I imagine Barnes like, what are we doing? What are we doing with some of these shots?
Sometimes he's the victim of just pass it to Zakai because there's 3 seconds on the shot
Yes.
clock and nobody else knows what to do, and Zakai probably knows what to do with it.
Oh yeah, he's shooting the rainbow. Like
Right.
Zakai is a great rainbow 3 guy. And sometimes they're going to go in. Like he has hit some crazy rainbow 3s in his 4 years at Tennessee. But that's just, I think his shot selection is always going to be hard. It's just it is what it is. But I think Igor is just such a more confident player shooting wise than Josiah was, and I think Santi last year it was really hard. But the combination of Chaz and Jordan shooting lights out, and just Dalton. I have to be careful. Like Dalton was so good, but I think he was such a unicorn offensively that I think it just made it really hard for the role players around Dalton to find their rhythm, to make it like it just, this Chaz is just a different kind of player. So like he's not going to be Dalton, but I think that's actually been better for Tennessee. And it's like one of those unknowns that you're talking about where you're like, you were a little more uncertain about this year's team versus last year, was because Dalton, like individually, the ceiling was high. But Chaz, he just gets it up quickly, and it just feels like it's more of a, and it's not Dalton's fault, but it just feels more team oriented. It feels more sustainable that all of these guys are shooting with confidence and all of these guys are playing with one another just in a better sense. I just think Dalton's game is just harder for role players to function at a high level around.
Yeah, I think we saw that with Santi, and kind of, he had a great career. He's a great player. He was better when the offense was running through him, and he was getting more threes, and he was kind of the focal point. He struggled to find whatever he was supposed to do around Dalton Knecht last year. And Dalton was a little bit more of, to the point you're making, like almost give him the ball and get out of the way. Like let this dude take over. And he was great at that. He was elite at that. We saw it all season. With Chaz, it's a little bit more of let's get Chaz open shots within the flow of the offense.
Yes.
And if they're not there, other guys are going to shoot. Like they're very different scorers in the way they attack the game. People like to compare them just because of the numbers, but the way they score it is so different. And the crazy thing is, Rick was talking the other night after the Miami game. He said, like, you give him an A+ for his first 9 games, and he's averaging whatever he's averaging. He's scoring a ton against Power 5 opponents. He's shooting it at a crazy clip like you were talking about. But he said he still stands around too much, and he still lets defenders shadow him, and he's not working hard enough to screen and get open and to do other stuff. And he's averaging close to 19 points a game. Like, how high is the ceiling for this kid if he starts playing the way Rick Barnes wants him to play? And Rick Barnes isn't trying to change everything and completely overhaul. He just wants him to try work harder to get open and do different stuff and do stuff for his teammates as well in terms of like screening and stuff like that and cutting hard and all that stuff. Like this is just kind of feels like scratching the surface, and it's been incredibly impressive to watch him just scratch the surface and score 25 and 26 and 19 and whatever these numbers are against really good opponents, the Power 5 opponents on the schedule. Like if he goes to another level and all these guys around him, like you're talking about the confidence and stuff, it's already a top 10 offense, but it feels like it could get a lot better too.
I mean, it's Chaz. The best the best compliment I give Chaz right now is just he takes 8 threes a game, and it doesn't feel like he's just chucking.
Right. It doesn't feel forced. Like
Yeah.
he's just, I don't know. Like it's just kind of effortless. Like he's just going to show up and he's going to make shots, and he doesn't. There's the expression on his face never really changes. The demeanor never really changes. He just comes out and he tries to make shots like that stuff against Baylor, the first whatever it was 5-6 minutes. I've never seen that before. And we watched Dalton Knecht all last season.
Yeah.
Like that's no insult to Dalton. It's just I've never seen a guy come out and just start firing away like that. And he's done it. He's shot, everywhere at the Garden, at Thompson Bowl. It doesn't matter where they are, what the situation is. He just makes shots.
Grant Ramey, what can the good folks check out from you and the wonderful folks over there at Volquest.com this week?
I mean, it's a kind of a pinch yourself kind of moment, trying to figure out what to read about Tennessee athletics, because I mean, the baseball team won a national championship in June, and that still feels surreal. And here we are, a week out or whatever it is, 8 days away from the college football playoff in the first round, and a massive matchup. And
it's getting colder by the day if you're looking at the weather report.
I've heard some updates from my boss on that, who's not looking forward to the 27 degrees or high of 27, whatever it is.
Hubbs isn't a cold guy?
No, Hubbs is as far away from a cold guy as you could get. But it's incredible. The basketball teams are undefeated. Basketball's ranked number 1, and nobody's even really paying that much attention to them because of the distraction of the college football playoff. I mean, it's an incredible time to be around and to watch all this stuff unfold and to get to follow all these teams around also. It's another pinch me moment for sure.
I love it. Grant Ramey, thank you as always, my friend. Go subscribe VolQuest.com today if you have not already done so. And Grant, we'll have to check back in again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.